He thought I'd bow down, that my entire career was his gift to bestow. But when I spoke the truth to his face, he transformed into an enemy ready to destroy everything I'd built. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 10 years. Every document, every witness, every betrayal he thought was buried. I kept them all. Today, standing in that boardroom as the new CEO, I wasn't just refusing his demands. I was about to expose the decade of lies that built his empire. My name is Elena Graves, and at 34, I'd just become the youngest CEO in Nexicor's history. But standing in that mahogany-paneled boardroom, watching Marcus Hale's face contort with barely contained rage, I knew this moment would define everything that came after. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Marcus's voice cut through the room like a blade wrapped in silk. While I congratulate Ms. Graves on her appointment, I believe it's crucial we acknowledge the foundation of her success. He turned to me, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. Wouldn't you agree, Elena, that a public statement of gratitude for my mentorship would be appropriate? After all, I practically built your career from nothing. The room fell silent. 12 board members shifted in their leather chairs, their eyes ping-ponging between us like spectators at a blood sport. Marcus stood there in his $3,000 suit, the same confident posture he'd perfected over 20 years of corporate climbing. The fluorescent lights caught the silver at his temples. Distinguished, he called it. Calculated, I knew it to be. I rose from my chair slowly, deliberately. My hands remained steady on the conference table's polished surface, though inside, years of suppressed fury threatened to explode. Mr. Hale, I began, my voice carrying the authority I'd earned through countless 16-hour days and sacrificed weekends. I appreciate your perspective. However, I must respectfully disagree with your characterization of my career trajectory. His jaw tightened. Disagree? Elena, let's not rewrite history here. Everyone knows. What everyone knows, I interrupted, feeling the weight of my new title for the first time, is that success at Nexicor comes from innovation, dedication, and results. My record speaks for itself. The Singapore expansion that saved us $12 million annually. The customer retention system that increased our market share by 30%. The procurement restructuring that cut operational costs in half. I paused, meeting his gaze directly. Those were my initiatives, my execution, my results. Marcus's face flushed crimson. You ungrateful. He caught himself, remembering the audience. This is highly unprofessional. I gave you opportunities when you were nothing but a receptionist with delusions of grandeur. A receptionist who worked 60-hour weeks while completing her MBA at night, I countered. A receptionist who identified the security breach in our client database that you missed for 3 months. A receptionist who never needed anyone to hand her success, only the chance to earn it. The CFO, Patricia Wong, cleared her throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion. No. Marcus snapped, his carefully maintained facade cracking. This needs to be addressed now. Elena knows what she owes me. The late nights I spent reviewing her work, the doors I opened, the connections I facilitated. Without me, she'd still be answering phones. I felt my pulse quicken, but my voice remained ice-cold calm. The late nights you spent putting your name on my reports, the doors you opened after I'd already picked the locks, the connections you facilitated while taking credit for my strategies. I straightened my blazer, not designer like his, but earned with my own money, not kickbacks. Mr. Hale, I owe you exactly nothing, and that's what you'll receive, nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his breathing shallow and rapid. Around us, board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, witnessing the unraveling of a man who'd held court in this room for over a decade. You've just made the biggest mistake of your life, he whispered, but his words carried to every corner of the room. You think that title protects you? You think these people will stand by you when I tell them the truth about who you really are? I smiled then, not warmly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd been preparing for war while their enemy was drinking champagne. The truth, Mr. Hale? By all means, let's discuss the truth. But I warn you, once that door opens, everything comes out. Everything. He stormed toward the exit, pausing at the threshold to deliver his parting shot. This isn't over, Elena. Not by a long shot. As the door slammed behind him, I remained standing, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This was it. The declaration of war I'd known was coming since the day I'd first refused to fetch his coffee and asked instead to review the quarterly reports. Marcus Hale had just become my enemy, and he would stop at nothing to destroy me. What he didn't know was that I'd been ready for this moment for years. Every document, every witness, every piece of evidence of his corruption, I had it all. The shadow of my supposed benefactor had just lifted, and underneath it, I was about to reveal the rot he'd been hiding all along. The memory hit me that night as I sat alone in my new office, the city lights sprawling beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. 10 years. It had been exactly 10 years since I'd walked into Nexicor's lobby, my only professional outfit pressed to perfection, my stomach empty because I'd chosen bus fare over breakfast. Kingman, Arizona, population 28,000 and dropping. That's where I'd started, waiting tables at my uncle's diner while studying business management at the community college. My guidance counselor had laughed when I'd mentioned transferring to ASU for my bachelor's. Be realistic, Elena, she'd said. Girls like us don't make it to the corporate world. Girls like us, brown skin, absent father, mother working 3 jobs. I'd proven her wrong with a 3.9 GPA and a scholarship that covered tuition but nothing else. I'd lived on ramen and determination, graduating summa cum laude while working graveyard shifts at a call center. Nexicor had been my moonshot, a tech giant that actually responded to my application. Receptionist, front desk, $32,000 a year. In San Francisco, that barely covered a shared room in a house with 5 strangers. But I took it because I could see what others couldn't access. Every executive who walked past my desk, every meeting scheduled on my calendar, every confidential document that crossed my path, it was all intelligence. Marcus had noticed me 3 months in. Not my potential. God, no. He'd noticed my mistake. I'd accidentally scheduled 2 client meetings at the same time, and he'd been caught in the chaos. I'd expected termination. Instead, he'd summoned me to his office. You're observant, he'd said, leaning back in his chair like a king on his throne. I've seen you reading the quarterly reports during lunch, asking questions about our infrastructure. That's unusual for someone in your position. I'd straightened my spine. I want to understand the business, Mr. Hale, every aspect of it. That's when the theft began, though I didn't recognize it at first. Analyze this customer complaint data, he'd said weeks later, dropping a stack of files on my desk after hours. I need patterns identified by morning. I'd worked until 3 a.m., mapping complaint categories, identifying systemic issues, proposing solutions. The next day, I'd watched from my desk as Marcus presented my analysis to the leadership team. My work, my insights, his PowerPoint slides. His promotion to senior vice president followed 2 weeks later. The pattern established itself quickly. He'd assign me learning opportunities, always urgent, always confidential, always resulting in his star rising higher. The customer retention system that became Nexicor's gold standard. I designed it on my laptop in a studio apartment with a broken heater. While Marcus was skiing in Aspen, he'd presented it as his vision for the company's future. The procurement restructuring had been the worst betrayal. I'd spent 6 months building relationships with suppliers, negotiating contracts, identifying redundancies. I'd created a 200-page implementation plan that would save the company millions. Marcus had submitted it to the board with one modification: his name on every page. This is how it works, Elena. He'd told me when I'd finally confronted him. I'm giving you exposure, experience. Without my protection, you're just another diversity hire they'll forget about. Play along, and I'll make sure you advance. Diversity hire. The words had burned into my brain like acid. Every achievement I'd earned, every hour I'd sacrificed, reduced to a checkbox on HR's compliance form. But I'd played along, documenting everything. Email threads where my ideas appeared first. Timestamps on documents showing I'd created them before Marcus had developed the concepts. Security footage of me working alone in the office while he was at charity galas where he'd later claimed to have had his eureka moments. 5 years in, he'd made me his direct report, senior analyst, then manager, then director. Each promotion came with the same speech. Remember who got you here, Elena? Loyalty is everything in this business. Loyalty. He'd meant servitude. Every promotion was another chain, another debt he'd expect me to pay forever. He'd grown comfortable, sloppy, certain I'd internalized my role as his shadow genius. The Singapore expansion had been his fatal error. He'd been so confident in my submission that he'd put my name on the preliminary proposals, the ones that went wrong. When I'd fixed the problems and delivered the solution that saved the company $12 million. He'd claimed credit for correcting his subordinate's mistakes while graciously mentoring her through the learning experience. That's when I'd started building my real network. Not with the executives who attended Marcus's bourbon tastings, but with the analysts who actually ran the numbers, the IT specialists who controlled the data, the administrative assistants who knew where every body was buried. The people Marcus never bothered to notice, much less respect. Now, sitting in the CEO's chair he'd assumed would be his. I pulled out a locked drawer and retrieved a flash drive. 10 years of evidence, 10 years of theft. 10 years of watching him accept applause for my work while telling me I should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. Tomorrow, he would start his campaign to destroy me. He'd spin stories about my incompetence, my unworthiness, my lack of gratitude. He'd rally his old boys network, the executives who'd benefited from the same system of stolen credit and suppressed talent. But Marcus Hale had made one critical miscalculation. He'd taught me himself, document everything, trust no one, and always have leverage. He just never imagined I'd been applying those lessons to him. The whispers started 3 days after our confrontation. I could feel them following me through Nexicor's halls like invisible serpents, coiling around every interaction, poisoning every conversation. Marcus had begun his war, and he'd chosen psychological warfare as his opening salvo. I walked into the Monday morning executive meeting to find the room already full, conversations dying mid-sentence as I entered. The configuration had changed. My usual seat at the head of the table was occupied by David Brennan, the COO, while a single chair had been placed at the far end, isolated like a defendant's dock. "Elena," David said, not meeting my eyes. "We've restructured the meeting format for efficiency." Efficiency. Marcus's vocabulary, Marcus's tone, coming from David's mouth. I took the exile seat without comment, watching as Marcus entered moments later, sliding into the chair at David's right hand, the advisor's position, the power behind the throne. "Before we begin," Marcus announced, as if he still ran these meetings, "I think we need to address the leadership transition concerns several board members have raised." Concerns? I kept my voice level, though my blood was boiling. "Questions about your experience, your methods, your—" He paused, savoring the moment. "Integrity." The room shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer Liu from marketing wouldn't look at me. Robert Nash from legal studied his phone. These were people I'd worked with for years, people who'd benefited from my strategies. Now they sat like strangers, or worse, judges. "Perhaps you'd like to explain," Marcus continued, "why the Singapore expansion reports show significant discrepancies in the initial projections versus final outcomes. Some might call that deceptive reporting." There it was, the same project he'd sabotaged, now weaponized against me. I opened my laptop, ready to present the actual data. But the screen flickered and died. The IT system, my access, frozen. "Technical difficulties." Marcus's smile was predatory. "How unfortunate." Well, I've prepared a presentation that might clarify things. For the next hour, I sat in that room watching Marcus systematically rewrite history. Every success became his rescue of my failure. Every innovation became his correction of my inexperience. The other executives nodded along, some reluctantly, others eagerly joining the new narrative. By lunch, I couldn't access my email. By 3 o'clock, my key card wouldn't open the executive floor conference rooms. By 5, security informed me that my after-hours access had been temporarily restricted pending review. I stood in the parking garage that evening, looking up at the tower where I'd given a decade of my life, and realized Marcus's plan. He wouldn't fire me. Too obvious, too actionable. Instead, he'd make me a ghost, stripped of power while keeping the title, until I either quit in humiliation or made a mistake he could exploit. The next morning was worse. I arrived to find my office occupied by Marcus's assistant, who informed me that I'd been relocated for renovation. My new space was a cubicle on the third floor, tucked between the printer room and the bathrooms. The nameplate read E. Graves. No title, no recognition. An email finally loaded on my phone, sent to all staff from Marcus as acting strategic advisor to the board. During this transition period, all strategic decisions will be routed through my office for review and approval. I was CEO in name only, a figurehead without a kingdom. Wednesday brought the cruelest blow. The quarterly planning session I'd scheduled weeks ago proceeded without me. Through the glass conference room walls, I watched my former peers, no, my subordinates, nodding as Marcus pointed to charts I'd created, strategies I'd developed. Rough week? I turned to find James Wong from IT standing behind me, holding 2 cups of coffee. James, quiet, brilliant, overlooked. He'd been with Nexacor for 15 years, passed over for promotion after promotion despite being the architect of our entire digital infrastructure. Marcus is thorough, I said carefully, accepting the coffee. He's scared, James corrected. That's why he had me lock your access. That's why he's got David and the others on short leashes. Promises of promotions if they fall in line. Threats of revelation if they don't. Revelation? James glanced around, then pulled out his phone, showing me an email thread. Marcus has files on everyone. David's expense account irregularities, Jennifer's relationship with a competitor's executive, Robert's creative billing practices. He calls it his insurance policy. My mind raced. How do you know this? Because he had me create the encrypted folders 5 years ago. He thinks IT staff are furniture, present but invisible. James pocketed his phone. He also thinks we don't keep copies. I studied James's face, searching for the trap. In Marcus's game, everyone was either a player or a pawn. Why tell me this? Because Marcus made the same mistake with me that he made with you, James said quietly. He forgot that the people he steps on to climb higher are still standing. We're just waiting for someone to remind us we can push back. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, the weight of the week crushing down. Marcus had executed a perfect coup, isolated me, discredited me, turned my achievement into a prison. The board would meet in 2 weeks for my first quarterly review as CEO. If I couldn't show leadership, show results, show strength, they'd have grounds for removal. Marcus had built his trap carefully, strategically, using every connection and piece of leverage he'd accumulated over 2 decades. He'd made me radioactive, untouchable, a pariah in my own company. But James's visit had planted a seed. Marcus thought he was playing chess with pawns. He'd forgotten that pawns, when they reached the other side of the board, become queens. I opened my personal laptop, the one Marcus couldn't touch, and began typing emails from my personal account, not to the executives who'd abandoned me, but to the shadows, the assistants, the analysts, the night shift, the maintenance crew, the invisible army Marcus had never bothered to see. Coffee tomorrow. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Nexacor's future. Elena Graves, CEO. No corporate email signature, no formal language, just one overlooked person reaching out to another. By midnight, I'd sent 43 invitations. By morning, 38 had replied yes. Marcus thought he'd buried me. Instead, he'd planted me like a seed in the foundation of his carefully constructed empire. And I was about to grow roots that would crack his castle wide open. The warehouse break room at 2 a.m. had never hosted a meeting like this. Under flickering fluorescent lights, amid the smell of industrial cleaner and reheated coffee, I sat with the people who actually made Nexacor run. Maria Gonzalez, night custodian for 17 years, spoke first. Mister, Hale doesn't think we understand English when he's on his phone. Last month, I heard him tell someone about moving server contracts to his brother-in-law's company, triple the price we're paying now. Thomas Park, warehouse supervisor, nodded. Those new inventory systems he implemented, they're designed to fail. Create shortages he can blame on operational staff while his friend's supply company swoops in with emergency fulfillments at premium prices. One by one, they shared their stories. Marcus's empire wasn't built on just stolen credit. It was built on corruption that bled the company while padding his offshore accounts. The security guards knew about the after-hours meetings with competitors. The mailroom staff had seen the doctored contracts. The night IT crew had witnessed the data manipulation. Why didn't anyone speak up before? I asked, though I knew the answer. To who? Angela from Accounts Receivable laughed bitterly. HR reports to Marcus's golf buddy. The board thinks we're numbers on a spreadsheet. You're the first executive who's ever asked for our input, who's ever actually seen us. I looked around the room, 43 people whose combined tenure exceeded 500 years, who'd watched Marcus's ascent from the ground floor. They weren't just witnesses, they were living archives of every crime he'd thought himself too important to hide from the help. I need more than stories, I said. I need documentation. James Wong pulled out a tablet. Already started, security footage from the loading dock showing those off-the-books shipments. Timestamps from the keycard system proving Marcus was in the building during the random server crashes that lost competitor bid data. Email metadata showing he forwarded confidential information to personal accounts. The thing is, Maria added, pulling out a worn notebook. We've been documenting for years. We just never had anyone who'd listen. She opened the notebook, dates, times, conversations, all in meticulous handwriting. Others pulled out phones, folders, USB drives. They'd been building cases against their oppressors, waiting for someone to give them voice. Sarah Bennett, a junior analyst Marcus had fired last year for underperformance after she'd questioned his numbers, appeared on James's laptop screen via video call from Seattle. I kept everything, every email where he told me to alter data, every spreadsheet showing the real numbers versus what he reported. I have backups of backups. The next 3 hours transformed that break room into a war room. We mapped Marcus's network of corruption, which board members were compromised, which executives were complicit, which clients were being defrauded. The picture that emerged was staggering. He's stealing about $8 million annually, Thomas calculated, cross-referencing invoices with actual deliveries. And that's just from the warehouse operations. The IT contracts are worse, James added. $15 million in overcharges, minimum. But it was Angela who found the smoking gun. 3 years ago, Marcus signed off on the Davidson Industries acquisition. Remember how their CFO died in that car accident right before the deal closed? She pulled up a scanned document. This is an internal memo from Marcus dated 2 days after the accident, containing information only the CFO would have known. Information that let us undervalue the acquisition by $40 million. The room went silent. This wasn't just corporate theft anymore. We need to be careful, I said. Marcus has resources, connections. If he suspects... He won't, interrupted Kevin, a maintenance worker I'd barely noticed enter. Because while you're all here, my crew is installing something special in the executive conference room. He held up a tiny device. Same cameras Marcus had us put in the employee break rooms to monitor productivity. Except these will be monitoring him. I looked around the room at these extraordinary ordinary people. They weren't just allies, they were architects of their own revolution. They'd spent years being ignored, overlooked, dismissed. But they'd been watching, learning, preparing. The board meeting is in 10 days, I said. Marcus will use it to call for my removal. He'll have his executives testify against me, present his falsified data, make his case that I'm unfit to lead. Let him, Maria said firmly. Let him stand up there and lie. Because when he's done, when he thinks he's won. She smiled, and I saw steel in her eyes. That's when we show them who really knows this company. We spent the remaining hours organizing. Each person had a role, a piece of evidence to protect, a truth to tell. The night shift would monitor Marcus's after-hours activities. The administrative staff would track his paper trail. The maintenance crew would ensure our surveillance stayed hidden. As dawn broke through the warehouse windows, I stood to leave. You're all taking an enormous risk. If Marcus discovers this, he'll what? Thomas asked. Fire us? Threaten us? Make our lives miserable. He's been doing that for years. The difference is, now we're fighting back. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced since taking the CEO title, hope. Marcus had built his power on the assumption that the hierarchy was absolute, that those below would always stay below, silent and compliant. But he'd forgotten the fundamental truth of every corporation. The executive suite might make decisions, but the ground floor makes things happen. And for the first time in Nexacor's history, the ground floor was about to show its power. I sat in my car, watching the sunrise paint the Nexacor tower gold, and thought about Marcus up there in his commandeered kingdom. He was probably planning his final moves, confident in his control, certain of his victory. He had no idea that beneath his feet, in the basement he never visited, among the people he never saw, a revolution was rising. And unlike his paper empire built on lies and theft, ours was built on something far more powerful, the truth, meticulously documented and ready to destroy everything he'd stolen. The text from James arrived as I started my engine. Cameras are live. Every word he says from now on is evidence. I smiled, pulling out of the parking lot. Marcus wanted war. He was about to learn what happened when the forgotten decided to be remembered. The boardroom had never felt more like a coliseum. 12 board members sat in judgment, their faces carefully neutral as Marcus concluded his 30-minute assassination of my character. Behind them, his hand-picked executives lined the walls like loyal soldiers, ready to confirm every lie. In summary, Marcus said, clicking to his final slide, a graph showing fabricated performance metrics. Ms. Graves has demonstrated neither the experience nor the temperament necessary for leadership. I recommend immediate restructuring of the executive team, with temporary oversight returning to proven leadership. He didn't say his name. He didn't need to. Board Chairman William Foster, Marcus's longtime ally, nodded gravely. These are serious concerns. Mr. Ale, Elena, do you have a response? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every hostile gaze. I do, Mr. Chairman. But first, I'd like to invite some additional perspectives. Marcus's smirk widened. Elena, this is a board meeting, not a town hall. We don't have time for the people who actually run this company. I walked to the door and opened it. I disagree. They filed in quietly but purposefully, Maria rolling a cart of binders, James carrying laptops, Thomas wheeling in boxes of documents. Behind them came 20 others, warehouse workers, custodians, security guards, administrative assistants, the invisible backbone of Nexacor. What is this? Foster demanded. These people aren't authorized. These people, I interrupted, are Nexacor employees with a combined 347 years of service. They're also witnesses to systematic fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage orchestrated by Mr. Hale. The room erupted. Marcus shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. You can't seriously expect the board to listen to the help? Maria Gonzalez stepped forward. That's what you called us last week. Mr. Hale, right before you discussed selling our pension fund investments to your private equity friend, I was cleaning your office. You didn't notice me, as usual. She opened her binder, pulling out a photographed document. This is the proposal you thought you shredded. I pieced it together from your wastebasket. 40 million in employee retirement funds, redirected to Garrison Equity, which, according to public records, lists you as a silent partner. Board member Patricia Chen reached for the document, her face paling as she read, Marcus, this is criminal. It's fabricated, Marcus snarled, but sweat was beading on his forehead. James Wong connected his laptop to the presentation screen. Speaking of fabrication, here's the actual performance data for the last quarter. The real numbers appeared, showing my initiatives had increased efficiency by 23%, not the 5% decline Marcus had presented. Mr. Hale had me alter these reports. When I refused, he threatened to have me deported, even though I was born in San Francisco. These are disgruntled employees, Marcus said, his voice rising. Elena obviously coached them. Nobody coached me, Thomas Park interrupted, wheeling forward a box. These are the real inventory reports, the ones showing you've been approving purchases from BlackRock Supplies at 3 times market rate. BlackRock Supplies, which is owned by your brother-in-law. 23 million in overcharges in the last 2 years alone. I watched the board members' faces transform from skepticism to shock to anger. Foster tried to restore order. This is highly irregular. We need to verify. Verify this, Kevin from maintenance said, pulling out a tablet. Security footage from this Monday, 9:47 p.m. Mr. Hale meeting with Gregory Walsh, CTO of our biggest competitor, in the executive parking garage. The video played on the screen. Crystal clear audio of Marcus promising to delay our product launch in exchange for a 7-figure consulting fee from Walsh's company. You bugged me. Marcus's face had gone from red to purple. That's illegal. Actually, Robert Nash from legal spoke up, his voice shaking. Employee common areas can be monitored according to the policy you yourself implemented, Marcus, to ensure productivity. The room turned to stare at Robert. He was supposed to be Marcus's man. Robert pulled out his own folder. I'm done being blackmailed. Yes, I inflated some billable hours 3 years ago. Marcus has held it over me ever since. But what he's done. He scattered papers across the table. Wire fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage, conspiracy to defraud shareholders. We're looking at federal charges. Marcus lunged toward Robert, but his security guards, stepped forward to block him. Sarah Winters, head of security, spoke calmly. My team has been documenting everything, Mr. Hale. On Ms. Graves's orders, we've been protecting the company's interests. When did you? Marcus spun to face me. You've been planning this since the day you told me I should be grateful to be your diversity hire, I said quietly. But I didn't have to plan anything. Marcus, I just had to give voice to the people you silenced. Angela from Accounts Receivable came forward with the final piece. Mr. Chairman, this is the Davidson Industries file, including evidence that Mr. Hale had prior knowledge of their CFO's fatal accident, knowledge that suggests it wasn't an accident at all. The boardroom fell completely silent. Foster's face had gone white. Marcus, tell me this isn't... It's all lies, Marcus screamed. Fabrications, conspiracies. You can't take the word of these nobodies over mine. I built this company. I made it what it is. No, I said, stepping forward. They built this company. Every day, every night shift, every weekend. They built it while you stole from it. And today, they're taking it back. Patricia Chen stood up. Mr. Hale, you're suspended immediately pending full investigation. Security, please escort him out. Marcus looked around wildly, searching for allies, but his executives had already begun backing away. David Brennan was on his phone, likely calling his lawyer. Jennifer Liu was crying. The empire Marcus had built on fear and lies was crumbling in real time. As security approached him, Marcus made one last desperate play. You need me, the contacts, the relationships. Without me, this company will collapse. Actually, James Wong said, pulling up another screen, I've analyzed our performance data excluding all of Mr. Hale's contributions. We'd be 31% more profitable without his interference. The board members were now standing, surrounding the evidence, talking rapidly on phones, FBI, SEC, district attorney. The words floated through the chaos. Marcus was dragged out, but not before he locked eyes with me one final time. You think you've won. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Neither did you, I replied. The difference is, I learned. The conference room had transformed into a forensic accounting crime scene. FBI agents had arrived within 2 hours of the board meeting, their white-collar crime unit treating our evidence like artifacts from a treasure hunt. Every document Maria and her team had preserved, every screenshot James had captured, every receipt Thomas had filed, it all became part of a federal investigation that would make headlines for months. But I wasn't focused on the agents cataloging evidence. I was watching Marcus through the glass partition as he sat in what used to be his office, now converted into an interrogation room. His lawyer, a sharp-suited man who'd arrived in a Bentley, was frantically taking notes as Marcus gestured wildly, his mouth moving in what I could only assume were more denials and threats. Ms. Graves, Special Agent Diana Torres approached me, her expression professionally neutral. We've reviewed the preliminary evidence. This is one of the most comprehensive corporate fraud cases we've seen. Your employees did exceptional work documenting everything. They're exceptional people, I replied, watching as Angela carefully walked the agents through 5 years of altered financial records. Mr. Hale's attorney is already floating a deal. Torres continued. He's claiming you orchestrated this as a hostile takeover, that the evidence was manufactured. I pulled out my phone, opening a file I'd hoped never to use. Agent Torres, this is a recording from 3 years ago. Marcus didn't know I'd started recording our mentoring sessions after he'd stolen my 4th project. Marcus's voice filled the room from my phone. The beautiful thing about people like you, Elena, is that you're so desperate to belong, you'll accept any crumb of recognition. You think documenting my methods will help you? I own the judges. I own the system. And if you ever try to use any of this against me, I'll destroy you so thoroughly. They'll use your name as a cautionary tale in business schools. Torres raised an eyebrow. How many of these recordings do you have? 18 months worth, all legally obtained in single-party consent situations. She nodded slowly. We'll need copies of everything. The next hours passed in a blur of testimony. One by one, my allies, Nexicor's real foundation, told their stories to federal agents. Kevin showed them the hidden server where Marcus kept his 2nd set of books. Sarah's security team provided footage of Marcus's late-night document shredding sessions. Unaware that James had already backed everything up to cloud storage Marcus didn't know existed. The revelation that hit hardest came from Patricia Chen. Yes, she shared the board with Foster. But she'd been suspicious of Marcus for years. She produced her own investigation file, showing she'd been quietly documenting irregularities, waiting for someone brave enough to stand against him. I failed in my fiduciary duty by not acting sooner, she admitted to the room. But Marcus had compromised half the board with his schemes. I needed someone clean, someone he'd underestimated, to make the first move. By sunset, Marcus's empire had fully collapsed. 17 executives had been implicated in various schemes. 3 board members had resigned in disgrace. The FBI had frozen multiple accounts containing embezzled funds totaling over $50 million. Marcus made one last attempt at control. His lawyer called for a private meeting, just Marcus and me, to discuss resolution. Against advice, I agreed. He sat across from me in the small conference room, his designer suit wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled. For the first time in 10 years, Marcus Hale looked human. What do you want? He asked, his voice hoarse. Money, my connections, a confession, name your price. I don't want anything from you, Marcus. Everyone wants something. He leaned forward, desperate. I made you. Without me, you'd still be nobody. I gave you opportunities. You gave me obstacles, I corrected. Every project you stole made me document better. Every lie you told taught me to build networks you couldn't see. Every time you called me a diversity hire, you reminded me that I had to be 10 times better just to be seen as equal. You didn't make me, Marcus. You forged me. In fire. His face crumbled. They're talking about 20 years. 20 years in federal prison. My wife has already filed for divorce. My assets are frozen. Elena. Please. Please what? Show mercy. Like you did when you fired Sarah Bennett 3 days before her health insurance would have covered her daughter's surgery? Like you showed Thomas when you cut the warehouse workers' holiday bonuses to fund your yacht? Like you showed me when you stood in that boardroom and tried to destroy everything I'd earned? Marcus slumped in his chair. You've won. Isn't that enough? This isn't about winning, I said, standing to leave. It's about justice. Something you never understood because you were too busy gaming the system to realize the system was made of people. People with memories. People with evidence. People with patience. As I reached the door, he called out one more time. Elena, I'm sorry. I turned back. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the people you stepped on to climb higher had been taking notes. You're sorry your invisible army became visible. But sorry for what you did? We both know better. I left him there, alone with the wreckage of his choices. In the main conference room, the real Nexacore team was still working with federal agents, their voices strong, their testimonies damning. Maria caught my eye and nodded, a general acknowledging another general after a successful campaign. Tomorrow, the media would descend. The stock would tumble before soaring on news of recovered funds. The industry would gossip and speculate. But tonight, in this building where Marcus had built his counterfeit kingdom, the real builders of Nexacore were finally being heard, and their truth was devastating. The federal courthouse in downtown San Francisco had become a circus. News vans lined the street, reporters thrust microphones at anyone wearing a suit, and social media had turned the Nexacore truth into a trending phenomenon. But inside courtroom 4B, where Marcus Hale faced a preliminary hearing on 43 federal charges, the atmosphere was more quiet. I sat in the gallery's third row, surrounded by the employees who'd brought him down. Maria clutched her rosary. James typed notes on his laptop. Thomas sat rigid as steel. We weren't required to be here, but we needed to witness the fall of the man who'd terrorized us for so long. Marcus entered in an orange jumpsuit, the uniform of federal custody. No Armani suit, no Swiss watch, no carefully styled hair. His attorney had abandoned the case after Marcus's assets were frozen. Apparently, loyalty had a price tag Marcus could no longer afford. The public defender beside him looked overwhelmed by the case file's sheer volume. Mr. Hale, Judge Catherine Morrison began, her voice cutting through the silence. You face charges including wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud shareholders, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. How do you plead? Marcus stood, his chains rattling. For a moment, I saw the old Marcus, the one who commanded boardrooms and destroyed careers with a smile. Not guilty, Your Honor. This is a coordinated attack by a disgruntled employee who... Mr. Hale. The judge interrupted. Save your theories for trial. Prosecution, please present your evidence for detention. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Kim stood. Your Honor, the defendant poses an extreme flight risk. We've discovered 3 offshore accounts totaling $12 million, 2 properties in non-extradition countries purchased under shell companies, and a false passport under the name Michael Harrison. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even I hadn't known about the passport. Furthermore, Kim continued, we have evidence that Mr. Hale attempted to contact witnesses despite the no-contact order. James Wong received 17 calls from blocked numbers traced to phones purchased by the defendant's associate. Maria Gonzalez found a note under her door offering her $200,000 to recant her testimony. Maria stood up suddenly. He also threatened my granddaughter, said accidents happen to little girls who walk home from school alone. The judge's gavel cracked. Ma'am, please sit. Mr. Hale, is this true? Marcus's public defender whispered urgently in his ear, but Marcus shoved him away. These people are lying. They're all lying. Elena Graves orchestrated this entire... Mr. Hale, you're making things worse, his attorney pleaded. But Marcus was beyond reason. I built Nexicor. I made it profitable. These people were nothing before me. Nothing. The judge's face hardened. Mr. Hale, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Kim produced more evidence, Marcus's attempts to transfer assets through his ex-wife, messages to former executives promising payments for false testimony, even a contract with a private investigator to dig up dirt on me and every witness. Your Honor, Kim said, holding up a printed email. This message was sent from Mr. Geeky. Hale's personal account 3 days ago to an unknown recipient. It reads, Elena Graves will regret the day she crossed me. I don't care what it costs or who gets hurt. Make her pay. The judge studied the email. Mr. Hale, bail is denied. You'll remain in federal custody until trial. No! Marcus erupted, struggling against his restraints. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I have connections. I have. You have the right to remain silent, Judge Morrison said coldly. I suggest you use it. Officers, remove him. As they dragged Marcus toward the exit, he twisted to face our section. His eyes found mine. And for a moment, time stopped. The mentor who'd stolen my ideas. The executive who'd built an empire on our backs. The man who'd tried to destroy me. He was nothing now but a criminal in chains. This isn't over, Elena, he screamed. You think you've won? I know things. I know where the bodies are buried. The board knew. Foster knew. They all knew. The doors slammed shut on his ravings, but his words lingered. The board members who'd resigned, were they just complicit, or were they active participants? After the hearing, Agent Torres approached me in the courthouse lobby. Ms. Graves, Mr. Hale's outburst about the board. We'll need to expand our investigation. I understand. There's something else, she said quietly. We've been contacted by prosecutors in 3 other states. It seems Mr. Hale's corruption extends beyond Nexicor. 2 of his previous employers are reopening internal audits based on our findings. The magnitude of Marcus's crimes was still unfolding. He hadn't just corrupted one company, he'd left a trail of financial destruction throughout his entire career. Outside, reporters swarmed. Ms. Graves, how does it feel to see your former mentor in chains? I stopped, looking directly into the cameras. Marcus Hale was never my mentor. He was a cautionary tale, a reminder that power without integrity is just theft with a corner office. The real mentors are standing behind me. I gestured to Maria, James, Thomas, and the others. They taught me that courage isn't about standing up to power. It's about standing up for truth, even when power tries to silence you. What's next for Nexicor? Another reporter shouted. Rebuilding, honestly, transparently. With every voice heard and every contribution recognized, the era of stolen credit and buried truth is over. As we walked away from the courthouse, Maria linked her arm through mine. 20 years to life, they're saying. It's not enough, Thomas muttered. Not for what he did. Maybe not, I agreed. But it's justice, and it's public. Every company in Silicon Valley now knows what happens when you exploit the people who actually build your success. James pulled up his phone, showing me Nexicor's stock price. After an initial drop, it was soaring. Investors love a good cleaning house story, he said, especially when it recovers $50 million in embezzled funds. But I wasn't looking at the numbers. I was reading the employee forum, where hundreds of workers were sharing their own stories of survival and resistance. Marcus's fall had begun something bigger, a reckoning across corporate America about who really creates value and who just extracts it. That night, I stood in my CEO office, My real office, not the cubicle Marcus had tried to exile me to. The city glowed beneath me, and I thought about Marcus in his federal cell, probably still raging about the injustice of facing consequences. He'd been right about one thing. He had made me, not through mentorship or opportunity, but through opposition. Every obstacle he'd placed had taught me to build better foundations. Every lie he'd told had shown me the value of truth. Every attempt to diminish me had only clarified my worth. Marcus Hale had spent his career climbing ladders built from other people's backs. Today, those people had stood up, and his ladder had collapsed. Justice had been served. But more importantly, justice had been seen. 6 months later, I stood before Nexacor's entire workforce in the main auditorium, not just executives, but everyone from the C-suite to the night custodial staff. The traditional hierarchy of assigned seating had been abolished. Maria sat in the front row next to our CFO. James occupied a board member's seat. Thomas had been promoted to vice president of operations, the first warehouse worker in company history to reach executive level. Today marks a new chapter, I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. The Department of Justice has officially concluded their investigation. Marcus Hale has been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. $47 million in stolen funds have been recovered and will be distributed. 50% to employee bonuses, 30% to restore the pension fund he pillaged, and 20% to establish the Nexacor Integrity Fund, which will provide legal protection for any employee reporting corporate wrongdoing. Applause erupted, but I raised my hand for silence. There was more to say. 3 board members have been indicted. 12 executives across 4 companies have been arrested based on evidence uncovered during our investigation. The SEC has implemented new regulations nicknamed the Nexacor Provisions, requiring greater transparency in corporate leadership decisions. But that's not why we're here today. I clicked to the first slide, a photo of our break room at 2 a.m. 43 employees planning a revolution over cold coffee. We're here because a group of people society trained us to overlook decided they would no longer be invisible. We're here because truth, meticulously documented and courageously presented, defeated a system built on lies. We're here because every single person in this company matters. The presentation continued, new policies ensuring every innovation was credited to its creator, profit-sharing programs that included every employee level, and an anonymous reporting system managed by an external firm to prevent future Marcus Hales from taking root. But the most important change, I said, is this. The screen displayed our new organizational chart. It wasn't a pyramid with executives at the top. It was a web, interconnected, with every department equally distant from the center, where a simple phrase replaced the traditional CEO box, collective leadership. I remain CEO in title, I explained, but decision-making now involves representatives from every level of this company. The executive board now includes 2 warehouse workers, 2 administrative staff, 1 night shift representative, and 1 facilities team member, all with full voting rights. Because Nexacor isn't built in the boardroom, it's built by all of us. William Foster, one of the few board members who'd survived the investigation, stood up. Ms. Graves, with respect, this is unprecedented. No Fortune 500 company has ever had 43 of its lowest paid employees take down a corrupt CEO with nothing but truth and courage either, I interrupted. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented changes. Maria stood up, her voice strong. Mr. Foster, for 17 years, I cleaned your office. I know you stayed late reviewing Marcus's reports, suspicious but afraid to act. Fear kept us all silent. This new structure means no one person can create that fear again. Foster sat down, nodding slowly. The old guard was learning to listen. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find a letter on my desk. No postmark, no return address. Inside, Marcus's handwriting. Elena, you think you've won, but you've only proven my point. You needed an army to defeat one man. That makes me stronger than all of you combined. Enjoy your moment. Prison is temporary. My influence is not. M. I fed the letter into the shredder without a second thought. Marcus still didn't understand. It wasn't 43 people defeating one man. It was truth, defeating lies, courage, defeating fear, unity, defeating division. James knocked and entered. The Times wants to do a feature. The CEO who gave power away. You interested? Only if they interview the whole team. This story isn't about me. Speaking of the team, James smiled. They have something for you. He led me to the break room, that same break room where our revolution had begun. The entire night shift was there, along with day workers who'd stayed late. On the table sat a cake with the words, "Truth wins." We wanted to thank you, Thomas said. Not for defeating Marcus, but for seeing us, for believing we mattered. You've always mattered, I replied, feeling tears threaten. I just gave you the microphone. As we shared cake and stories, someone had brought a laptop showing the news. Marcus's conviction was still trending, but newer stories were emerging. Companies across the country where employees were organizing, documenting, speaking up. The Nexacore effect, they called it. You know what the best part is? Angela said, scrolling through her phone. My daughter saw me testify. She said she wants to be brave like me when she grows up. For 17 years, I felt invisible at this job. Now my kid sees me as a hero. That was the real victory. Not Marcus's imprisonment, or the recovered millions, or even my vindication. It was the security guard who now served on the ethics committee. The janitor whose efficiency proposal was being implemented company-wide. The warehouse worker whose son no longer had to hear his father dismissed as just manual labor. As the celebration continued, I stepped onto the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in another gleaming tower, another Marcus Hale was probably stealing credit, silencing voices, building his empire on others' backs. But also out there were 1,000 Marias, Jameses, and Thomases, documenting, waiting, preparing. Marcus had written that prison was temporary, his influence permanent. He was wrong about that too. Prison might be temporary, but the change we'd created, the empowerment of every voice, the destruction of toxic hierarchy, the proof that truth could triumph, that was permanent. 6 months ago, Marcus had stood in a boardroom and demanded I bow to his false legacy. Instead, I'd stood up, and 43 others had stood with me. Together. We'd torn down his empire and built something better from its ashes. The revolution hadn't ended with Marcus's conviction. It had just begun. And it would spread to every corner office, every boardroom, every place where power tried to silence truth. Because we'd proven something Marcus never understood. The people at the bottom of the ladder weren't holding it up for executives to climb. We were the ladder itself, and we were done being stepped on. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and courage in the corporate world. I'm curious. Where are you listening to this story right now? Are you on your commute, at home, or perhaps even at your own office? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to connect with all of you. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about standing up to workplace injustice. Your experiences and insights make our community stronger.